The design process for me really starts right back at the sketching stage. So when I finally get an idea and I start doing the sketching and I make my notes, what I tend to do is I put down all my thoughts and my ideas. So really the design part started right here. So the next step is we went and did the plan, and now I'm up to the stage where I've got my photographs, and really what I'm trying to do now is sort through my photograph to see which photograph suits best my idea. And this is the really easy part, because I collect all the information, and then what I do is I start looking and saying, okay, well, I think she's reaching too high here and the shadow shape is covering her face, so that one's not a good one. I really like this. I think that this one's actually quite good, although I don't like her leg position as much. Obviously, it's really easy to color ones that are not going to work. That is not going to help my idea one little bit. I can't see a face in this one. When I get down here, there's this begging look, and I'm not convinced that the begging look it's okay, but it's not great. This one here is out. It won't work. This one here I love. She's got a lovely look on her face, although she's not engaging with my idea is having the birds in. So it's okay, but not great. I love this one. Again, it's quite good. I like that pleading look, you know, please come and play with me. But I can't really see too much of the hands here, and I really like this yoga pose. This one here, that gets a big tick. I love that one, and I can't go past it. All of these others, with the kneeling pose, even though I like the look and the hand in this, the kneeling pose is still not as good as the yoga pose, and I really love that nice relaxed hand area. This one here she looks scared, and therefore it won't help with my storytelling. And this one here obviously is out straight away because I can't see her face. So what I do now is I basically say that's the one, and I start working with this photo and I try and make it fit my image. So how do I then come up with the next part of the painting? Well, I need some support in there. Now, in my idea, I always wanted to put her having a new friend. What was her friend? Her friend is the birds. So capturing Poppy was quite easy compared to capturing the birds. So what I've got now is I've got a series of photographs of some birds. I've taken these of the sparrows. I wanted a nice, cute bird, so I've chosen the sparrow, and I needed one that was, you know, that had the same sort of light source, so the light direction is coming from this way. I also wanted to put a flying bird in as well, and so here's my photo references of my flying birds. Again, I do the same thing. I do a culling process, and I think, okay, what do I like? I like that bird, and I like its shadow. I don't like this one, it's too fluffy, so I'm not going to worry about that. I like this bird, except it's facing the wrong way for the image. I really love this one. This bird is going to be in. This bird here is looking towards me too much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to substitute him and put these two birds in my painting, and I can just see them they'll be going down the bottom of this painting in this area somewhere. Now I come to the flying bird one. This one looks too dart-like, so that one's out. I like the wings going, you know, downwards, but it doesn't show me the bird's body. It covers up too much of the bird's body. So I'm going to go for either this one or something like this. So it's going to be a flying bird with the wings out. And again, I can see it going up in this area here somewhere. So that's where we're up to with the design stage. All right, what I also love about this pose is that it's in a lovely portrait format. And what I mean by a portrait format is when if a painting is in this format here, where the height is larger than the width, that's called a portrait format. And if it's this way, where the height is less than the width, then that's a landscape format. And I really like this portrait format. I'm actually painting a portrait, so I'm going to go with a portrait format. Plus that format also helps me put in where I can put in my support actors, my birds. So I'm going to keep it as a portrait format. And when choosing a format, the subject matter usually dictates what format you have. If I was going to put a church in and it's nice and tall like this one, obviously that lends itself to a beautiful portrait format. Again, same if I'm doing a figurative piece and they're reclining on a lounge, I would do it so that it's a landscape format, so I can fit everything in. This one here is a figurative piece again, but she's standing up. It lends itself to a portrait format. And the last one, which is a lovely landscape scene with the lovely vista and the river going back, again, lends itself to be a landscape format. So I've already considered this in my design when I'm thinking about putting all my elements in, the birds and where Poppy's going to be sitting. It lends itself to the portrait format. And design is all about, for me, balance. If I was to give these four shapes, the two circles and two rectangles, to, let's say, a mathematician, and I said, could you please position these in a rectangle so that it felt balanced? More than likely, the mathematician would do something like this. So in actual fact, yes, it is balanced. It's beautiful, you know, the sides, and it all feels balanced. And if I was to put a pivotal point here, it does. It feels lovely and balanced. But really, with a design like this, if I was to put it like this, the pivotal point kind of seems like it's not quite balanced enough here. So one easy solution would be if we changed over and we went to this sort of design where we inverted two of the shapes. Now it feels like it's very well balanced. You know, we've got exactly the same amount of weight distributed around the rectangle. And if I put a pivot here, it feels very balanced as far as weight is concerned. And if I was to put a pivot here, it now feels the weight is distributed. So it will tip, you know, you can either tilt it either way. It feels balanced. Nothing tips too far either way. But for me, yes, look, it is balanced, but I find it visually not very stimulating. It's a little bit boring. So as an artist, taking those four shapes, because I design my paintings around, I cut and I paste and I rearrange them, what I would do is I would take those exact four shapes and I would position them on my rectangle in a little bit more visually stimulating way. So what I could do is overlap shapes, for example, and I could actually take bits out of shape and put them somewhere else. Now you can see that there's still a lovely distribution of weight, and it's very visually stimulating. It's lovely, and it balances again both ways, whether I'm doing it as a portrait format or as a landscape format. And you can see that it doesn't tilt one way or the other. And this shape out here, it's hugging the edges a little bit more, so it's creating a little bit of tension. But what it's also doing is it has weight. There's the distribution of weight is changed by fulcrum. If I had there's just a ruler and I had a whole heap of weight on one side, and I had a little bit of weight on the other side, what you'll find is if I let that go, if I position that in the middle, it's going to tip to that side all the time. So how can I make that balance by not changing the shapes? What you can do is you can move the fulcrum. So the balancing point, if I slide that over and I make the balancing point come further over towards the heavier area, we will find that we'll get a perfect balance right about there. And you'll see that the larger shape will balance I can even make the smaller shape outbalance the larger shape, but you'll find that you can increase it so it's perfect balance. All right, so what I've done is I've redistributed these shapes using the fulcrum, and I'm pushing the fulcrum out. So what I'm doing is I'm using this small shape here to balance this large mass here, and I put that further towards the edge of the page so it does the distribution of weight. Now, not only can you do it like this, and you can increase this visual distribution by making this particular shape that's hugging the edge different. If we were to take the same principle, having that little shape balancing the bigger shapes, all I have to do is make it different, and I can make it different by making it a different color. So it can balance a large mass of dark by making it a lovely different color. In this case, obviously the red commands a lot of weight. It's so different to all the black, and it's bright and it's colorful, and it has a lot of weight. So you can see that by using this distribution of weight here, that's what we're doing in this way. You can also do it with contrast and values. So if you had a large mid-tone, you could do it with a dark or a light, and you can balance it that way. So I use this in order to help place my birds. And so by distribution of weight, it helps me design my paintings. All right, so how did I apply that to my actual design? So I've got the same theory applies. I've got a large mass here, and what I do is I offset it with the bird hugging this edge, and you can see that it balances everything. If I put a pivot here, you can see that this shape here actually helps balance all of this large mass. So I'm using a physical principle as a visual aid as well. So in my design, I'm thinking about the lights breaking the darks and the darks breaking the lights. I'm thinking about, obviously the hand commands a lot of weight because it's a dark against a mid-tone. Where the lights are coming out, I will make sure that the lights are breaking mid-tones and the darks breaking the lights. So it all balances, and to me it's pleasing. Once I have this photo, I then transfer that image onto a drawing, and then what I try and do is incorporate the other parts of the painting that I want in there. So in this instance, the birds. So what I do is I use the drawing to try and sketch out where I want the birds. So in how I design a painting is I use a composite of photos, and what that means is that I take bits and pieces of other photos and combine them together. So in this instance, what I've done is I've got obviously the photo of Poppy, and then I've got some photos of the birds. And so what I do is I literally cut them out of a photo, and then I stick them on. So I'm going to put that one up there, and I'm going to put these ones in here. Now, what I've done is I've used the drawing as a, if you like, to cement my idea. And then I come along and I take the reference material and I put them in. Now, this is where I start to muck around with where to position these birds. So do I actually want it so that's really close here? Well, I can't have it down too low because her eyes are looking up higher. So I actually move the bird up to where she's looking, in around about the area that she's looking. So I'll put it up there, and I can just manipulate the bird. If I have it this way, it looks like it's not well balanced, and I really like that idea that it's pulling in to land. So I'm going to keep it at around about that angle. With these guys here, I've combined two photos together. I've taken a bird out of one and a bird out of another, and I've put them in. And now what I do is just position them so that I slide this around so that I can feel where they would best suit my design. I can move them up, I can move them down. Again, design is all about putting the elements that you need into your painting into a pleasing way that suits you. There are a lot of rules, and there's many books out there that you could spend the rest of your life learning composition. But basically it comes down to what feels good to you. If it appeals to you, it's bound to appeal to someone else. And Pierre Bonnard said that a painting that is well designed is half finished. So I'm a true believer in that. I believe that most of the time I spend creating a painting is in that design area. So my painting is designed around really two planes. There's the background, and the foreground. I really haven't got a middle ground in this. When we talk in terms of planes, a typical landscape will have a background, a middle ground and a foreground. In my painting, in this particular case, it's only got two planes, a background and a foreground. And what I mean by that is that I'm not placing a lot of emphasis on the background. I don't need any other elements in this design. It's really about, my focus in this painting is about this figure. And what is she doing with trying to communicate with the birds. So that's what my whole design is based around. I'm not really concerned. I'll leave these out. I'll take them out, and I'm just looking at little things that I'm going to change, and I'm already starting to plan my painting. So one of the most important things when producing the design for me is making sure that all the elements fit together. So I've got to have the same direction of light and the same strength of light, and I incorporate this into my design. So once I get to this stage, here's my design with my cut out birds, and I look at it and I start to think, yeah, okay, I'm getting to a stage where this is something that excites me. It's something that I want to paint. So the other thing I like to incorporate into my design is relative size. How big are these birds in relation to my figure? What I normally do is measure, obviously, the model's head, and then in this case I know that Poppy's head measurement was around about that 13.5 centimetres. And so then I had to work out how big the sparrow is in relative size to Poppy's head. And so what I did then was I went to our bird book, and I looked up the house sparrow, and I found that the house sparrow was around about that 15 centimetres mark. So then I have to allow for foreshortening and where the birds actually fit. And so I make sure that it looks and feels believable. The hardest part with the composition photos is making it look believable. All right, so this is my result. I'm actually getting to a stage now where I find this is something that excites me, and I want to paint it. How did I know where to position those birds, I hear you ask? Well, that involves a little bit more theory, and I want to show you how I arrived at that. All right, the other tool of design that I use is called the armature of the rectangle. I love the armature of the rectangle. It's probably the one that I use the most. So what is the armature of the rectangle? Really, it's just a way of dividing the rectangle into divisions. What I do is I can divide this rectangle into half by doing the diagonals from corner to corner and then from corner to corner. Now, where those two lines intersect is halfway, gives me a halfway mark. So if I wanted to divide the rectangle into further divisions, what I can do is use the same device. So in this case, what I do is I'll go from diagonal to diagonal and then back to the halfway mark from this diagonal. And then I'll go from this diagonal here to a halfway mark up here. And then back to this halfway mark here. Now what that's done is just divided my rectangle yet again. So where these two lines intersect right here, it's divided my rectangle into a third. Where these two lines intersect here, it's divided it into quarters. Where these two lines intersect here, it's divided it into fifths. And where these two lines intersect here, it's divided it into sixths. So by just doing a series of lines, I've now divided my rectangle into halves, thirds, quarters, fifths, and sixths. So what aid is that? How does that help? Well, what I like to do is position my items according to these areas of. I use the intersecting lines, and I use the space between the intersecting lines to give me, where I place my items, the area where I place my items. So if I wanted to place my bird in, what I would do is I would use all of this. I love that space between the girl and the bird. So I'm going to put my bird right on that line that's in here, and there's the quarter mark and the fifth mark, and I'm going to make sure it follows this line for the wing. So that's where I would position that bird. So how do I know to fit these ones in? Well, I'll do exactly the same thing. So what I tend to do is I draw another series of lines, and I don't always use a ruler. I'm at a stage now where I can superimpose my armature in my head, and I kind of don't even need to do this anymore. So I just do it kind of roughly, and what I can do is start to position these birds, and I look at these intersecting lines and I say, okay, I would like to put a bird right in that triangle there, and that tells me exactly where to put my other birds. So what I've done is I've used the armature of the rectangle to help me place the items that I want in my design. So if you focus on the ring on my finger, and I say to you, now don't take your eyes off the ring on my finger, and then I hold up my other hand and I ask you, am I wearing a watch? You say, yes, I'm wearing a watch. Now I say, what time is it? No idea, it's out of focus. So this is peripheral, it's not important, okay? This is in focus, this is out of focus. It's there, but it's not important. This is what's important, how you're looking straight at this and it's in focus. So that's what we call a focal point. And I like to put the emphasis on, in my paintings, at least one focal point. I don't actually have a focal point, I have a focal area. And so in this particular case, the focal point is usually, when you're doing portraits or figurative pieces, it's usually the human face. We as humans are drawn to other humans. We are constantly drawn to the fact of another human face, and they're really instantly recognizable. So in this particular case, this is the focal point, but I really like this to be the focal area. I really want you to look at the bird, the face, and the space between them. The space between them represents everything this painting is about. The hope, the expectations of the little girl. I hope this bird lands on my hand. I wish this little bird would land on my hand. And so the space is actually very important in my design. These other things are like the watch on my hand. They're there, but they're not important. I'm not going to give them a lot of weight. I'm not going to give them a lot of focus. So how do I make something become in focus or out of focus? What I do is anything that's got an extreme in contrast usually commands attention. It actually makes it in focus. So if my lights are lighter and my darks are darker in this area, then that's where you're going to look. If I keep my darks paler and my lights darker down in this area, it won't command a lot of attention. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to design all of my area of interest in and around these two parts, the face and the bird and the space in between. And the hand is obviously there as well. It's very important in my storytelling. In reality, what I did for this design was I used the rules of third, and I combined that with the armature of the rectangle, which is all the divisions, the diagonals, and I combined them together in order to place my items, and just to show you how this works. So the rules of third is that we just divide our reference material into thirds. And so I've placed Poppy's head right in that 1/3 area. And you can see that there's already the body is hugging this 1/3 line, and her face is in this 1/3 quadrant. So what I actually did was I combined the rules of third with the armature of the rectangle. So I've divided the drawing into thirds, and then I've used where the rule third is, I'm actually drawing the armature up to the halfway mark from the third mark. And this gives me a beautiful division of space. So I'm going to go from this third up to here. And right where that X marks the spot is where I put my bird. So how did I know where to put these birds down here? I went from the third mark down here. And again, I did from this third to this quarter here. X marks the spot. And how did I work out how to put this bird on? I went from this third mark to the diagonal, and then from this third to this third. Again, X marks the spot. And I've used this theory to help me with design. I'm not a slave to it. I will move these around and manipulate them to how it suits me or my vision, but I really do rely on them a lot to position the elements of my painting, the elements of shapes in my painting. How I worked out where to put Poppy's face, there's a lovely golden mean in this section. I try and fit, look at this beautiful triangle that these three lines have made, and so I've put her nose and her eyes within that triangle. So for me now that feels right. Again, I've got it to a stage where I'm busting to paint it. So when you get to that stage, you've designed it, and we're ready to paint. All right, that was all a little bit complicated, I know, but I use this nearly every day of my life. I've got to a stage now where I can superimpose these grids over my photos or my ideas or my drawings, and I use them as a guide only. Once it's there as a tool that I can draw out whenever I need it. It really is down to, it's got to be aesthetically pleasing to you. It comes down to what is pleasing for you to look at in order for you to paint it. Like I said before, I'm getting it to a stage now, this reference material, where I'm busting to paint it. And that's more important than anything. I've got all the elements in there as far as I'm concerned. I love the interaction between the birds and the girl, and now I'm busting to paint it.